meeting. What you will see during proceedings is transitions from one member to another, to various officers and to members of the public. As you can appreciate, this is a new technology which we are trialling as a City Council, so we appreciate everyone's patience and understanding as we seek to work our way through the applications before us today. In practical terms, I'll shortly be confirming with individual members on the committee to test their connections and confirm they can see and be heard by everyone present. In terms of how the meeting will be run, all participants are asked to keep their microphones on mute throughout, unless a question is to be asked by a member of the committee, in which case the member will just request to unmute your microphone briefly to indicate you want to ask a question, and will then put you on screen fully. In terms of the process, we'll go through each of the applications in turn. We will then have a presentation from the applicant, which will take up a full screen display while the applicant's voiceover will continue. And I would ask applicants and agents to indicate next slide clearly, so my colleagues can ensure the slide transitions occur easily. In terms of objectors, there is up to 3 minutes allowed per objector addressing committee, and we'll move from objector to objector depending on how many are registered for that specific item of business. In terms of addressing committee, obviously for members of the public, the only opportunity is if you're a registered speaker, and a number are already present and welcome to join this morning's meeting. As each speaker concludes, we'd ask you to remain on briefly to allow opportunity if members of the committee wish to ask any questions of you. What will then happen once we've dealt with speakers, we'll move into the relevant case officer, and then the ultimate determination of the application based on a resolution of the committee subject to a voting process, which will be conducted individually, name by name, through the members of the committee. As long as everyone is clear with that, I'm now going to move and just verify with the individual members that we can all be clearly seen. So moving firstly to the chair, can you unmute your microphone and confirm that you can see us and hear us correctly? Could you just repeat that, please, Trish?
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Thank you, Chair. Next, I will take Councillor Cummings. Councillor Cummings, if you could please unmute your microphone.
Yeah, I'm here. I can see everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Councillor Hanson, if you could just unmute your microphone, please, and confirm you can see and hear us okay. Just repeat that, please. We didn't hear you. You'll need to repeat that, please. You still appear to be muted.
I can hear everybody.
That's thank you, Councillor. If you could remute yourself, please, I'll move on to the next colleague, Councillor Thompson, who I will pin to the screen now. Councillor Thompson, if you could please unmute your microphone and confirm if you can see and hear us correctly.
Yes, I can see you. I can hear you, but you break up quite a lot.
Okay, noted, thank you. And again, if anyone else struggles with breakup in terms of members of the committee, please could you say, and we will briefly repeat what's been said, so for purposes of clarity. Thank you. If you can mute your microphone again, thank you, Helen. Councillor Kennedy, if you could unmute your microphone, please. Can you confirm if you can see and hear us okay?
Yes, President, correct.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. We'll now move on to Councillor Lavelle. I'll just pin you to the screen, and then could you just unmute your microphone and confirm you can see and hear us?
Morning, everyone. Absolutely fine.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Juarez, I'm moving to you next. I'm just going to pin you to the screen, and can I ask that you unmute your microphone and confirm you can see and hear us?
Hi, everybody. I
Thank
can
you.
hear you. Hi, everybody. I can hear you and I can see you all fine.
Thank you. We will now move to Councillor Marat. If I can find you on my list. Councillor Marat, you should be coming on screen now. If you could just unmute and confirm you can see and hear us.
Everything's fine, Michael. See everyone, hear everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Marrett. I will now move to Councillor Conception. If you could unmute and confirm you can see and hear us.
Morning, everyone. I can see and hear everyone fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I'll now come over to Councillor Sharon Ross. Councillor Ross, can you unmute your device and confirm you can see and hear us? At this point, I'm just going to move off Councillor Ross. I'll come back to Councillor Ross in a moment. Councillor Spurrell, I'm going to pin you to the screen now. Can you unmute your mic and just confirm that you can see and hear us?
Yeah, I can see and hear you fine, thanks.
Thank you, that's excellent. And I will try going back to Councillor Ross now. Okay, I'll come back to Councillor Ross later. I think for now, we will now move into our items of business today. First of all, in terms of apologies for absence, we have apologies from Councillor Steve Radford. Do we have any further apologies from members? Based on my record of attendance, we don't at this stage. In terms of declarations of interest from members, do members have any to declare? If so, please unmute your mic now and state clearly what your interest is and to which item it relates. No declarations. I have no urgent items of business to report for today's meeting. So with that in mind, I will now move us over to our first item of business, which for purposes of clarity for all present, that is item number 3 on the agenda, the former Hondo supermarket at numbers 5 to 9 Upper Duke Street, Liverpool 1 in Riverside Ward. And I will bring the chair in to now introduce the various speakers that we have on today. Chair, if you could unmute your microphone, please.
Right, so for item 3, the Hondo supermarket, I have in my chair's note that we have an agent who's pre-registered, who's going to be giving us a presentation of up to 5 minutes. I think maybe the name's at the very end of all of this, so I've got to flick to the very end of my... No, that's in a separate list. Sorry, I'll get the separate list up now. Yes, so the speaker is Michael Lampard, if he would like to present to us now, please.
Mr. Lampard, if you care to unmute your microphone, please.
I have done, yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask my colleague to now display a PowerPoint and share it on screen for everyone to view, and then your time will start. So just bear with us briefly while we enable that feature. It's on now, so Mr. Lampard, if you'd like to make a start.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you for inviting me to speak. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for arranging this meeting. It's what must be very difficult, but the technology seems to be working, which is great. Thank you. So Fusion, we've been developing the scheme on Upper Duke Street, and I'm Michael Lampard from Christopher and Wright. We are Fusion's architects. Fusion are providers of purpose-built student accommodation, and they've developed many successful schemes across the UK. And we have been fortunate to have worked with Fusion on many of their schemes over the last 9 years. Fusion provide homes for students that respond specifically to local needs, and this scheme offers a mix of unit types, styles and sizes, supported by quality learning spaces and external and internal amenities. The site on Upper Duke Street is a fantastic redevelopment opportunity, and it provides an excellent location for student accommodation. We understand the site has been identified as a redevelopment opportunity for over 15 years, and we've worked closely with your officers to gain their support, and we believe this is the right approach. It's an opportunity to create a high quality building, providing homes and one befitting of its location in the Rope Walks Conservation Area and the Knowledge Quarter. Can we have the next slide, please?
Mr. Lampard, is that the correct slide?
Yeah, can we have the
next one?
It's here. We have it.
Okay, I can only see a site plan at the moment.
It seems to be slide number 3 that we're seeing now. but we did have slide number 2 up before.
Okay, sorry, thank you. Okay, so we've worked closely with your officers, Barbara Kirkbride and Sam Campbell, to develop what we believe to be a piece of architecture that understands its surrounding topography and townscapes constraints with an appropriate scale, form and quality of materials that will enhance the city. The existing building contributes little to the area and creates poor spaces and relationships to existing buildings and streets, as you've read in the officer's report. The Rope Walks SPD specifically identifies the site as an enhancement opportunity and to help the negative impact of the current building. Through the design process, we have tested a number of design configurations, as I think was shown on the first slide, and our current scheme is a significant reduction to the initial scheme we discussed with Barbara and Sam, and we believe that this is creating an excellent opportunity. Our scheme is developed to respect the existing scale and a detailed analysis. So those are the scale diagrams there you're seeing on the screen there. So you can see between Figure A and Figure B is the changes from the originally submitted scheme and our current scheme. Along Upper Duke Street, the buildings step up to reflect the rising topography to the Liverpool Cathedral, which is a characteristic seen in adjoining streets where buildings rise incrementally with the levels. We've created an active frontage to the Chinatown Square, which will further help to activate the public realm, and the ground floor spaces will also be visible here to further enhance the setting. We've designed the building to go to a strong corner to Roscoe Street, and reinstate a familiar building line which is seen elsewhere in the conservation area. We've also created some defensible space around the development to support street level living spaces. Can we just have the next slide? Thank you. So along Back Knight Street, we've tested a number of configurations to help improve the existing setting. Here we have visually widened the existing street by placing development away from the existing site boundary and introduced defensible landscape space, which will provide help to improve visual amenity and provide a buffer between the two buildings. Our current scheme has been amended to reduce the scale on Back Knight Street, a change from the initial design, and we've added directional windows to our plans to reduce overlooking. And we believe the additional surveillance created along Back Knight Street will help to improve the space and the streetscape. Can you have the next slide, please? And the next one after that. Thank you. This slide illustrates the view from Chinatown Square and the approach and the visual impact. Throughout this process, we've liaised very closely with heritage officers, etc. And we believe we produced an excellent scheme. Can we have the final slide, please? Okay, so you've seen the visuals for our development, and we believe this will be a welcome addition to the city and further help to secure talented students to local universities. We've worked hard with your officers who've challenged us regularly throughout the process to produce a piece of design worthy of their recommendation. This is why we also believe we received the support of Heritage England, Historic England, and there have been no objections from either your Heritage or Highways team. Fusion would like to thank you for inviting us to speak, and thank you very much.
Are there any questions from members of the Planning Committee? No? Well, then oh, Emily, is that you asking to speak?
It's Myrna, Chair.
Myrna, okay, if you'd like to give your question to Michael Lampard.
Yeah, the scheme says that it's going to be between 4 and 6 stories high. Previously, it was going to be 9 stories. It says between 4 and 6. Well, I'm glad that it's not going to be 9, but it's still kind of on my documents that I see. It still just says between 4 and 6 stories high. Can the representative make it clear how many stories it's the project is going to be?
Okay, so along Upper Duke Street, facing as you step down to the Chinatown Square, the building steps from 5 stories on the corner of Roscoe Street and Upper Duke Street, stepping down to 6 stories as you get closer. Because of the topography of the site, there's almost a level change in the building, so it actually goes from 6 on the lower part of the site nearest to the Chinatown Square towards Berry Street, 5 stories on the corner of Roscoe Street, and as it moves towards Backnight Street, it reduces further to 4 stories.
Thank you for your response. I get it now. I have kind of been in that area, and I do realise that the ground level is, it changes somewhat from the corner further down Berry Street.
It does, yeah. And the existing building has quite a significant basement under it as well. So there's quite a lot of level change. And I think both Backnight Street and Upper Duke Street are quite deceptive, really, in terms of their steepness. It is around 4 metres difference from the bottom of our site to the top of it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
That's the difference. Okay.
Thank you for that, Michael. Are you happy now, Councillor Juarez, or do you want a follow-up question?
I'm fine for now, thank you, Chair.
Are there any other questions for our presenter?
Yes,
from
Chair, if I could, Emily.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. Go ahead, who? Who
Go
is it?
ahead with the question, please.
Okay. I see that you've got some of the apartments are suitable for people in wheelchairs, etc., which is good. I just wanted to ask about the lifts. Are the lifts fire-safe lifts?
Well, clearly there's a lot of interest around fire safety within student buildings. The simple answer to that is they can be, yes. There's no reason why they cannot be. But given the stage of this project at the moment, that hasn't been determined. But it's certainly a huge consideration with any student and residential scheme at the moment. So, of course, if it's needed to be, yes, it can be. In terms of means of escape for people in wheelchairs, there's a lot of provision made for those people in terms of safe places, etc. But if there needs to be a firefighting lift in this building, then there will be a firefighting lift in this building, yes.
Okay, so can I ask that we put a condition in this that at least one of the lifts needs to be a fire-safe lift, firefighting lift?
Councillor Thompson, I think that'll have to be dealt with through our planning officer's presentation, which will come after the 2 objectors that we've got to speak yet. Is that all right?
I've just reviewed our fire strategy actually very quickly while you're on the line, and we actually do have 1 firefighting lift and 1 evacuation lift already designed in the building already. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you for that. So can I now pass over to Claire Fury, and she'll be followed by Ben Webster to address the committee. Would you like to go ahead, Claire? Claire?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, yeah, it's Ciara. Obviously Ben is with me here, so we'll just do it together. Yeah, the main thing, we live in Archview Crescent. We've got 2 quite large arch windows, so it doesn't allow for a lot of privacy. And currently where we are, we can see into the building behind already. So that would be the main point that we have as a privacy issue.
Okay, and are there any questions for Ciara? Sorry for getting your name wrong.
Okay.
Anybody got any questions? Okay, thank you for that, Ciara. I'd like to, is that Ben with you, or is Ben?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, no, that's
Ben,
that's
do you
us
want to
together.
add
Thanks.
anything?
No, that's fine. It's
Okay.
it's just the privacy.
All right, thank you then. So can we hand over now to our planning officer, please?
Chair, thank you very much. It's Fergal McAvoy, team leader for the City Centre Development Management Team. There's an extremely large report in front of you where all the issues have been addressed in terms of the principle of development. I think the 2 main issues are relating to both design, scale and massing, and issues of residential amenity. As is made clear in the presentation, the scheme as originally submitted was between 5 and 9 stories. Through long dialogue with officers, this has been reduced to a scale between 6 stories at the lowest point, tapering down to 4 stories in Roscoe Street, which we are satisfied in terms of a heritage aspect is acceptable in that location. It's been noted that there's been no objections received either from our heritage officers or from Historic England. In terms of the 2 objectors who made representations, they live in a residential block on the opposite side of Upper Duke Street, and the interface distance between this development and the block that those people live in would be between 16.8 and 18.5 metres. So as members are quite aware, sometimes city centre schemes are compromised in terms of interface distances. In this instance, we're more than satisfied as officers that an interface distance between 16.8 and 18.5 metres is more than satisfactory and wouldn't lead to any issues of overlooking or loss of privacy. I think in relation to the issues that Councillor Thompson raised in terms of firefighting and evacuation lift, they've been addressed by Mr. Lampard, unless Councillor Thompson has any other queries in relation to that. As said to members, you've got a full detailed report in front of you where all the issues have been raised and addressed by officers, and we're satisfied to recommend this scheme for approval subject to the completion of the legal agreement. Chair.
Have any of the members of the planning committee got any questions for Fergal?
Yes, Chair, if I could, Emily Sporrell.
Go ahead, Emily. Go ahead, Emily.
I'm just waiting to get up on the screen. There we go.
Oh,
so I'm in time. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I mean, it's my age-old question that I always ask, but obviously it's a huge development with over 400 new residents. There's no parking provision, and parking is already a nightmare around there. And apologies, I'm not sure whether there should have been a question to the representative, but it's a very, very dense development in an already overpopulated area in terms of student accommodation. Given the current situation with Corona, there's every chance we're not going to be getting lots of students in September coming to the city. We already have a lot of accommodation. Are we confident that demand is there and that we need something this big in a place so close to somewhere like Chinatown?
Fergal, would you like to answer that question? And you will.
Okay, Chair. Yeah, Chair. Thank you. I'll answer certain aspects of it, and then perhaps the issue of kind of the future viability of student accommodation in terms of coronavirus may be best answered by the applicant. Yes, it's a car-free development. However, there are 150 cycle spaces proposed within the development. We are satisfied, given its previous use as a Chinese supermarket, it would probably be less vehicular traffic to it on an ongoing basis. Obviously, there would be high levels of parking at the start and end of term, but there's a management plan to cover that in terms of how parents park up and drop students off. As I said, it's a prime city centre site, so we're satisfied with car-free development in this location is acceptable. I said there's 150 cycle spaces proposed within development. The interior student accommodation, there's spaces in terms of the space standards. The bedroom units are between 11.5 and 14 metres square metre floor area, whereas the studio apartments are between 18 and 22 square metres. They're kind of comparable sizes for other student schemes throughout the city. Maybe Mr. Lampard would like to answer Councillor Sporrell's question in terms of coronavirus and the impact on student provision in the future.
Okay, so this building, if it's approved if there's a resolution to grant today, won't be ready for occupation until 2023. So I think everyone would hope that the current situation is resolved at that point. I think Fusion operate many buildings. They've got 12 buildings across the UK, and currently within the coronavirus lockdown, they've done a lot to support the mental health of students, making sure that there's adequate spaces within their buildings at design stage. So all of the buildings design good quality social space in there. So they're not just in their bedrooms. They've got plenty of space. Many of their schemes have got external space as well. But they've also been introducing on-site doctors and testing within their buildings as well to make sure that people are kept healthy. So I think when you compare them to many other student types of buildings, the amount of support space that the buildings have, external space, which is included within this design as well, I think there's plenty of provision to ensure that can work well, and social distancing can be maintained. So there's a lot of, I think if you look at Fusion sort of social media, they do a lot of mental health wellbeing work anyway. So the work that they've been doing recently on helping students, some are nationals, some are overseas students, has been exemplary, really. I mean, I follow a lot of their social media and see what they do. If I just go back to the car parking question that was raised earlier as well, if I may, just briefly, as I said just now, they've developed 12 sites across the UK, and none of them have had any car parking at all, apart from one which is a shared site with a hotel. So they operate a policy where cars are not acceptable. They always choose locations that are close enough for people to walk to campus anyway. And as Fergal pointed out, there's plenty of cycle parking on site as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Michael. And as we know, we've had other precedents for student accommodation where in fact now it's managed so that the parents have to drop off and pick up, or the students themselves make arrangements. So it's all staggered, and we don't get unregulated traffic movements around these student developments.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly what will happen here. Thank you.
So can I move now?
Can I come in? Can I come in?
I come in as well.
Who's speaking?
Both
It's Mike here. I think Joe was also wanting to come in. I think we've got a slight problem with Michael not controlling the access, because he can see things that you can't, i.e. who's unmuted their microphone in order to, oops, I'll move that to try and get me in the picture better. Where are we? Oh, there. So I had a question before, but was unable to get in.
Okay, Malcolm, well, go ahead with your question then.
Yeah, well, the two questions basically I had was, reading the report, I did notice that it referred to problems with lighting in neighbouring properties, which did not appear to be fully solved, and I was wondering whether more could have been done, and I would like some comments on that. The report does refer to some harm to designated heritage assets, which haven't been covered, apart from saying there was no objection from Heritage England. And looking at the pictures of the presentation given by the applicant, I was just wondering a simple question when I saw the brick, whether it was actual brick or whether it was a station.
Malcolm, some of that was a bit unclear, but I'm going to hand over back to Fergal to answer some of those points, but some of it was covered in the agenda items. So can I call on Fergal to answer those points, please, from Malcolm?
Chair, thank you very much. I think from the two issues Councillor Kennedy raised was in terms of issues of light and impact on adjacent residential properties. I'm talking about my face hasn't come up on the screen. I'm assuming you can still hear me. An impact on...
I can hear you, Virgil,
Okay.
so carry on.
Okay, an impact on heritage assets. Officers have worked hard in relation to ensuring that you get a viable development which does not impact on adjacent residential properties. As I previously said, the overall scale has been reduced from 5 to 9 stories to 4 to 6 stories, where there's interface with residential properties, especially in Roscoe Street and more particularly the rear of a residential development in Backnight Street. Those heights have been dropped to 4 stories in height, and the block where you will have seen on the presentation, the block facing the rear properties on Backnight Street has been set back to give an interface distance with Backnight Street of between 6.5 and just slightly 7 meters interface distance, which we are satisfied in a kind of tight city centre urban grain that this is a satisfactory interface distance. In relation to the Anglican Cathedral made representations in terms of the overall height, but as officers and as Historic England or the National Consultancy, we're satisfied that there's no impact on heritage assets. The current supermarket is between 2 and 3 stories high, and there's no impact. It has no kind of impact in terms of the visual aesthetics of Duke Street Conservation Area, whereas the height of this building will increase somewhat. We're satisfied in terms of the material palette, in terms of the design of the building. It will actually enhance the conservation area, and it doesn't impact on any of the listed buildings in proximity to the development site.
Thank you, Fergal. Now, I believe we have somebody else who wants to come in. Is that Councillor Hanson?
Yes.
Yeah, if you'd like to speak now, Councillor Hanson.
Hear me, yeah? Hello?
Yeah, yes, I can hear you. Carry on.
Just in terms of the, excuse me, the actual project, I mean, it really replaces what is an eyesore at this point in time on the corner of the street. I accept what the officers are saying in terms of the privacy and the distances and all that kind of stuff. I accept that, and they're right and proper to do that. A question to the developer: given the concerns that the 2 objectors have got, is there any possible way that you can do some enhancements to further protect their privacy? I'm unsure if there's anything you can do, but it's certainly a question that I think perhaps needs asking, and perhaps a response from yourself might be helpful to the 2 objectors.
So it's unusual to do it in this order, but it's easier, in fact. So I'm really calling, well, Councillor Hanson's calling on the developer to come back in here, but I'll also have a follow-up comment from Fergal if he wants to come in. So could I ask Mike to answer that question as best he can?
I will do. Okay, so along the objectors, as I understand it, they live on Archview Crescent, which is on the opposite side of Upper Duke Street. And you know, I think as Fergal's pointed out, this is a pretty wide city street, and it overlooking. So you're looking more obliquely along Backnight Street, because we recognise that it is a very narrow road. It's a very narrow street. But obviously we pulled the building away from the existing boundary, so that should help to improve that. And again, you know, we've tried to introduce rooms along that edge that mean that the students are less likely to be standing good neighbour to all of their developments. And again, I think any nuisances, if there are any nuisances, can be dealt with directly by the management within the buildings as well, who have worked with Fusion for a very long time. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Mike. Virgil, did you want to say anything else? Because you've already dealt with the question of the objectors' interface distances. But if there's anything else you want to say, do come in.
No, Chair, I'm happy. Unless Councillor Hanson has any other questions, I'm happy that those issues he's raised have been addressed.
Okay, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Kennedy, can I move now onto the motion, please? So can I move that the recommendation as amended be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members that voting for purposes of virtual meetings has to be done individually by name. And also for purposes of this meeting, Councillors Ross and Spurrell are present as alternates and observers. So that is to cover any eventualities in terms of any members having technical difficulties to enable proceedings to continue. So Councillor Spurrell and Ross will not be able to vote. With that in mind, we will move to voting, in which case I will take Councillor Cummings first. Councillor Cummings, I would ask you to unmute your microphone and to please confirm for the record what your vote is on this application.
I approve.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Please remute your microphone. I'll move on to the next member. Our next member will be Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hanson, could you please unmute your microphone and confirm your vote? Just be confirmed, please. We couldn't hear that clearly. Councillor Hanson, you're coming across as on mute, so if you could please unmute your mic.
Can you hear me now?
We can do now.
Okay, I'm for you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. We now come to Councillor Thompson.
I agree.
Thank you. Councillor Lavelle, please unmute your microphone.
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marat, please unmute your mic. Councillor Marat, if you could unmute your mic.
Yeah, sorry, Michael. 4.
Thank you. Councillor Juarez, I'm just putting you on screen now. If you could unmute your microphone, please, and confirm your vote.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Conception, I'm coming to you now. I'm just going to pin you on screen. If you could unmute your microphone, please, and confirm your vote.
Yeah. A welcome scheme, fully support.
Thank you. And we will now come to the chair, Councillor O'Brien. If you could confirm your vote, please.
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. Just bear with me. I will confirm the vote to you now. Just check the numbers. Voting based on the data is 8 in favour, 1 against and no abstentions. Therefore, on that basis, the application is approved subject to the published conditions. Are you happy with that, Chair?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Chair.
So can we move on to agenda item 4 now, which is 4 Roscoe Street, and it's land bordered by both Roscoe Street and Oldham Place in Liverpool 1. And can I invite Pauls, Jackson and Murphy to speak as agents? So Paul Jackson first.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, what it actually is, it's myself. I'm the applicant, architect and owner of the site. we've got an agent, which is Colin Williams, and we've got Paul Murphy, who came in last week because he had some issues with the software, is a local resident who wants to speak about the scheme, but that'll be after.
I see. So Paul's going to come on later.
Yes, straight. He'll come in on this link.
Yes.
Okay.
But are you speaking now, Paul Jackson, about the application?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you'd like to go ahead, then.
Okay. Thank you. If you could put the first slide up, please. But first, I'd like to say thanks for the time, giving me the time to come and represent this site. Purchased the site a number of months ago after it had had an approval for student accommodation. 111 student studios was approved.
For interrupting, I cannot see anything on the slide system. Far right page.
That's it. This is the site at present. This end of Roscoe Street is a hive of antisocial behaviour. It has been for many years, and it's probably the last part of Roscoe Street where it's a bit of a rundown area. So it was originally going to be student accommodation. I purchased the site and worked closely with the planning officers and produced a scheme for 82 1 and 2 bedroom apartments for sale or rent. So if you could take the next slide, please. That's just a typical floor plan. And the next slide. At the very outset, we wanted to produce a scheme that was very similar to the approved scheme. The scheme worked, the planning officers and the planning committee liked the design. So we produced this scheme, which is elevationally, it's almost identical. The red actually represents the approved scheme outline. So as you can see, the scheme is the same in terms of scale, height and massing. The only difference being there's a mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. A large number of these are DDA compliant. We've worked very closely with the planning officer and the access officer to get a good proportion of M4 1s, 2s and particularly 3s. The scheme has there's no car parking. The scheme has a large number of internally secure bike store. It works very well with the street scene, as did the approved scheme. It's very similar. I think it will actually add to the area. It'll add to natural surveillance and make this end of Roscoe Street a much more pleasant and desirable place. So if I pass over now to Colin Williams, who is the planning consultant, and then Paul Murphy after Colin, who is a local resident. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you clearly.
Thank you. As the report in front of you set out, the key planning issues that we have dealt with are very, very similar to the ones that you set out and agreed in principle for the student accommodation development. There's actually very little in terms of the way the principle of development and land use would be for this development as well. Residential use, very similar to the way student accommodation is accepted as part of a mixed-use area within this part of the city centre. One of the key issues that you will have seen in the report, and Paul did mention it, is the DDA compliant units. The scheme that is in front of you was actually amended quite a bit through discussions with officers, around about kind of middle March, early March time, and then we were asked then to consider increasing the number of M42/M43 units. At the time, we'd already complied with what is the national minimum standard for M4 units, and is actually the national planning guidance standard, where there's no local standard in place. And in terms of local standard, that means an adopted policy being in place that sets any different standard to the national standard. So the scheme was actually designed to comply with national standard and included an additional amount of M42 and M43 units. Your access officer applying draft policy H12 of the new local plan quite rightly is seeking to increase the number of accessible units, and there's no issue with that. What we have had to do is to balance the way the scheme was amended already and to balance it with viability. But we have increased the number of M42 and M43 units from the original 24% in the scheme up to around about 70%. So as your report says, it's worked hard to meeting the objectives of the emerging policy, and I hope that you can see it achieves a good balance. We are way above the national minimum standard, and we're very close to where the council would hope to be when the new local plan comes into force, and if the inspector accepts the way that the council's new standard should be. So all the issues are set out in front of you in terms of the report, and I hope you will approve the application in accordance with recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that. Are there any questions for those two presenters from committee members?
Could you just put the slides 2 on, just so you can see the visualization as well, please?
So do we have any questions from the planning committee? No? Well, in that case, can I call on now Paul, who I believe is going to speak in support?
Yeah.
So Paul, if you'd like to speak now, please.
Good morning. I'm a resident of the area. I've lived there and worked there for over 20 years, and I have a family of 3 adult children who also live there, and I now have grandchildren who live at who go to school at the southern end of the street. I've always been concerned about the northern end, which, because of its neglected state, does encourage antisocial behaviour. I'm also an active member of the Georgian Society, and so I'm not just a passive resident. As far as the visual impact of the building is concerned, I think the design is good. It can't just be a case of Georgian buildings being rebuilt in the area. I recognise that, and I believe that the people who will come and live either as owners or renters in that building will add to the social mix of the area. I do support the scheme.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I'm not entirely clear now. I've got down that we've got somebody called Emlyn Williams, who's chair of the Rodney Street Association, who's also got to speak today. Is that correct? No?
No.
So can I pass
That's
over
correct,
to our
Chair.
planning-
Yes.
Oh,
We do
it
have
is.
Mr. Williams to speak. I'm just checking to see whether he has been able to access.
Mr. Williams, would you like to come on now? I can't hear anybody. Well, in view of the fact that nobody has come on audio, can we hand over to our planning officer? And if in the meantime, Mr. Williams is going to come on, who's chair of the Rodney Street Association, we can hear him after we've heard from our planning officer.
Chair, thank you very much. the concerns of, given that Mr. Williams isn't in attendance, the concerns of the Rodney Street Residents Association have been addressed within the officer's report. They've raised concerns that they feel the development should be a scale of 2 to 3 stories on Roscoe Street as opposed to 4 stories what it currently is. And they feel that there should be they acknowledge that they're satisfied that it's a residential development as opposed to a kind of student accommodation scheme, which was what you previously approved back in October last year. We're satisfied that the scheme in front of you today is virtually identical in terms of scale, design, as to what you previously granted. The main issue in relation to this application is it's a change from student accommodation to residential accommodation, which would be offered for sale in the open market and rented in, and it's concentrated on mature students and key workers. All the issues raised in previous applications in terms of the impact on heritage assets, the impact on the 2 adjoining conservation areas of Mount Pleasant and Duke Street, they've previously been asked and answered. So unless members have any particular questions in relation to this particular scheme, I'd like them to, if they have any questions that they need answering.
So can we have any questions now from Planning Committee members?
Chair, I would like to ask a question.
Yes, carry on, Councillor Juarez.
Yeah, well, the scheme seems quite sympathetic to that local area, and I'm really pleased that it's going to, the application is going to contribute £100 towards cycling improvements within that area, that vicinity. Can I ask, when the money is used to improve the facilities for cyclists, how is the council going to get involved in implementing that? And I mean, for me, I think, you know, we've heard of so many cycling schemes, but what I would like is like proper, meaningful facilities where cyclists can cycle safely. So, you know, I do welcome the scheme and I do welcome the application of that contribution of the £100 per apartment. But, you know, I really do want to see the money well spent and well used so that people do actually cycle around that area, because, you know, this application we've had today that is not going to be providing any parking to the rest.
To be clear, there is cycle parking, but as in
yes, there is cycle parking, but yes, there is cycle parking. I've read that within the report, Chair, but it says that the applicant will pay £100 towards cycling infrastructure within that vicinity. So as a member, I'm just saying that I would like that money well spent, and how is the council going to get involved in implementing that and making sure that it's safe for cyclists?
I will hand over now back to our planning officer and, if appropriate, the highways officer, to see what's been done about the cycling infrastructure in the area, if I may.
Okay, Chair, thank you very much. There's a provision within the Section 106 legal agreement attached to this recommendation in terms of a contribution of £8,200, which equates to £100 per residential unit, towards improvements to cycle provision within the city centre, which would have to be paid prior to development commencing on site. I'm unsure how that money would be spent in terms of specific provision. I don't know if Andy Dingwall is listening on. He's the highways officer who may be able to address the specific questions that Councillor Juarez is raising.
Andy, would you like to say something, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Andy Dingwall, Highways Development Control Team Leader. Part of the responsibilities within the Highways Development Control is for walking and cycling. We have a dedicated walking and cycling officer who's in the process of reviewing the highway network, in particular regards to cycling across the whole city, but also in the city centre. Following that review, there'll be an identified network whereby improvements will be required to provide safe and direct cycle links. A good example of the type of infrastructure that we've recently introduced is that's been put in on Park Lane, where you've got completely segregated cycle lanes, separate footways and separate carriageways. And that's kind of the standard of cycle infrastructure that we're looking to put in today. And that's the kind of thing that we can expect this money to be spent on in the city centre. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Andy, for that. Are there any other questions from other members now? I don't hear anybody, so I'm going on to move that the recommendation be approved. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Same voting arrangements as per the previous application. I'll go through the list of members present and ask you to vote in turn. So taking Councillor Cummings firstly. I'm just going to put you on screen now. Can I ask that you unmute your microphone and confirm your vote? Just reconfirm that, please, Councillor Cummings, for clarity.
I approve.
Thank you. Can I ask everyone else present to please mute your microphones as well? Next, take Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hanson, if you could unmute your microphone and confirm your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Agreed.
Councillor Lavelle.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Kennedy, could you unmute your mic, please?
Sorry about that. Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marat. Councillor Marat. Thank you. Councillor Juarez. If you're going to unmute your mic, please, and confirm your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Juarez. Councillor Conception.
Agreed.
Thank you. And the Chair, please.
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. There being no further members of the committee present, the vote is 9 in favour, none against, no abstentions, and on that basis, the recommendation and the application is approved. Chair, we now move to our next item of business,
Which is land at Ortbridge and Lancome, East Lancashire Road, Liverpool 11. And I have that we have Jay Sladansky and Natalie, is it Marley, to speak. Would Jay and Natalie like to speak and come online?
Hi, yes, it's Natalie Mail.
Natalie Mail, thank you.
So I've got myself, which I'll talk through the presentation. It's the I'm representing from Ainsley Goman Architects. If you'd like to load up the first slide, please. So I was just waiting for the first slide to load up. Okay, so we've got myself here today from Ainsley Goman Architects, and we've got Jay Siadanke. He's from Cobalt, the client. So the site we're referring to as Old Bridge is a residential development site on a site in Croxteth along the East Lancs Road. The site once housed 3 tower blocks, has been vacant for a number of years and contributed nothing to the local community. Something just slipped there. No. Sorry, that's the second slide. Yes, it lies on the edge of the Stonedale estate, which is a large Radburn-style housing estate. The estate has been run down over the years, and our applicant Cobalt has an objective to revive the estate and enhance the existing housing stock and circulation within the area. It's an excellent location for family housing, and with good links to the city centre, which has been taken into consideration in the scheme. The scheme will provide 57 new affordable homes for the local community, which will consist of a mixture of 2 and 3 bedroom houses and 1 and 2 bedroom flats. All of the homes have been designed to meet both the National Space Standards and M42 of the building regs. As well as this, there is 1 specially designed 4-bedroom house and 6 2-bedroom flats, which adhere to meet M43 standards and are therefore fully wheelchair accessible. We've worked closely with Planning Officer Hannah Owens to provide an appropriate development for the site in terms of scale, materiality and housing mix. The site will be an extension to the existing Stonedale estate, and there is a pedestrian footpath link between New Road B and the East Lancs Road, which will link the bus stop and connections to the city centre. The existing defensible landscape buffer surrounding the site has been kept and will be enhanced to visually improve the amenity and help create a noise buffer surrounding the site. We have also worked with an acoustic consultant who has generated a report as part of documentation for this application. We've worked with the Highways Department and have designed adequate parking and cycle storage accordingly. Parking will be softened with soft landscaping and materiality throughout the scheme. Cobalt Housing are a local housing association who set out to improve the local housing stock in the community, and this application is part of their vision to regenerate the Stonedale estate. Thank you.
So is Jay going to speak next, Natalie?
I think Jay's just present to answer any questions if there are any.
So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to invite any questions from members of the planning committee. Are there any questions?
Yeah, could I
ask a question?
Please, carry on.
Very simple. Just confirm when you're looking to complete this new plan.
So Councillor Cummings is asking when you're likely to be able to complete the whole development.
Can I come in and answer that one?
Certainly.
So we're currently out to tender. Tenders were due back last month actually, but due to the current COVID situation, that's now been extended to the 1st of June. So mid-June we'd be hoping to commission instruct our contractor, the successful contractor. With a lead-in period of 8 weeks or so, we would hope to be on site, all things being well, in August, and then it's a 16-month build program then. So we'd be looking to around, is it April? Does that come? It takes around April 2022.
Thank you very much for that. I'm sure that answers your question clearly, Councillor Cummings. Are there any other questions?
Please, Chair, could I raise a question?
Yes, carry on.
Natalie, thanks for your contribution. And I certainly think it would positively impact the visible space, given it's basically a piece of derelict land. Just a quick question. I imagine it's probably something which you can answer, Jay. On the section 106, which is what you've requested, what Cobalt have requested to be waived to make the development viable. I'm just wondering why that was the case, because on the last financial report from Cobalt in 2019, you exceeded expectations financially. So I was just wondering, would there be any discretion on if you think it's not acceptable to pay 100% section 106, could some agreement be made to pay something at least?
Yeah, well, we put in a viability just to give an outline view of what the scheme's costing us, and basically the residual value that's left. It came back minus 2 million. Approximately, I can't remember the exact figure. I'd have to get the file out. That has been submitted. So we felt that with it being Homes England supported to help us acquire the site, the fact that there's Homes England grant helping us develop the site also, to pay in excess of £130,000, I think was asked for through the Section 106 contribution, was excessive. Anyway, long story short, that was reviewed by your viability team, and they accepted our application, and we will still be contributing £7,500 to the local area through the highways improvements.
Yeah, thank you for that. Are there any other questions for the applicants? In which case I'll pass over to our planning officer, please. So can we have our planning officer?
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
Can everybody hear and see me?
I can certainly hear you.
Let me
Yes,
just
I
check.
can see you now.
Yeah,
John.
I can see myself as
Carry
well.
on. Yeah, I can see you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. My name is John Heath. I am the team leader for planning matters in the north of Liverpool. Chair, you've got a very full report in front of you which details all the various issues associated with this particular application. I just want to make 2 points, one of which will pick up on Councillor Lavell's issue around Section 106. But the first point to make is in relation to the design. You'll see in the report that there is quite some explanation around the design issues, and you've heard from the applicant this morning about the need to set it back from the East Lancashire Road with an acoustic report stating that otherwise there will be a problem in terms of noise, the noise environment for those new occupants. So we're looking to ensure that there is adequate acoustic screen, but obviously it's important to make sure that that screen is visually satisfactory, and obviously the landscaping as well will help screen some of that. So they are matters that will be conditioned. The second point in relation to Section 106, Chair, the applicant has maintained that this is a challenging site to develop in terms of its viability, and you've heard from the applicant confirming that they have actually had to get grant in order to make it work. They have submitted a viability report to the council that has been reviewed by our external consultants, who have found that the methodology and the conclusions that it's reached are satisfactory, and they accordingly advise that Section 106 should not be applied in this particular case. We do, however, consider that it is necessary to implement highway works, so there is an element within the Section 106 for £7,500 to be paid. Hopefully that covers everything, Chair. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions from members of the Planning Committee? Okay, so I'm going to move that the recommendation as amended be approved. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. As per voting and previous approach, I'll go through members on the list first. Firstly, Councillor Cummings, I'll put you on screen now. You just unmute and confirm your vote.
Fully approved.
Thank you. Next, we'll come to Councillor Hanson. Can you please unmute your microphone?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Agreed.
Thank you. Now to Councillor Lavelle.
Agreed.
Just reconfirm so you're on screen while the vote is made.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marat.
Agreed.
Just reconfirm so you're on screen. Thank you. Councillor Juarez.
Agree.
Thank you. Councillor Conception.
Agreed.
Thank you. And lastly, our chair, please.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just to confirm the voting on this application and recommendation. That is 9 in favour, none against, no abstentions. Therefore, the recommendation is carried and the application is approved. Chair, if we move to our next item of business, please.
We move on to agenda item 6, which is 115 Anfield Road, Liverpool 4. And I'd like to invite David Moore to speak.
Thank you, Chair.
You'd like to carry?
Yeah, just waiting for the slideshow, if it's available, please. Okay, thank you, Chair, and morning all.
Good morning.
There we go. My name's Dave Morse. I'd like to present the proposals for the conversion of the former police station at 115 Anfield Road. I'll briefly talk about the building, comment on relevant planning considerations, address the main concerns that have been raised, and I'll look forward to any questions. So this is a proposal for a change of use from a HMO to 26 bedroomed bed and breakfast. Although not listed, the building is of value to Anfield's historic built environment. As such, the proposed development will look to conserve its value through providing a sustainable future use for the building. Through careful design, the repurposing of the building will protect its architectural and historic significance, both inside and out, through the retention of the original features and, where possible, the original plan form. The investment associated with this proposal will ensure that the building is maintained appropriately, including refurbishment of the building's exterior. Next slide, please. From the plans, you'll see that the original cell block and sergeant's living quarters have been retained as far as possible. Legibility of these components of the building are considered important to its conservation, but also to the quality of the conversion and providing a USP to the finished product. As such, great importance has been placed on weaving necessary facilities for the safe and accessible operation of the B&B into the historic form of the building to ensure that it meets modern standards. Next slide, please. The full report in front of you sets out all the issues, but in respect to planning considerations, we would comment as follows. There's been positive pre-application engagement with the local planning authority. The package of information lodged with the application exceeds that of the local validation requirements, as the applicants strive to avoid any misapprehension or ambiguity for interested parties. This package includes a comprehensive acoustic survey, a robust hotel management plan, a service and delivery management plan, and a construction management plan. Further engagement has since taken place with ward councillors and the local community to provide assurances and further information where needed. At both the pre-app and full-app stage, the principle of development has been considered acceptable, with the full application demonstrating compliance with the development plan and all other supplementary guidance. This proposal directly supports the objectives set down in the Anfield SRF insofar as it proposes additional tourist facilities within the area. There's been no objections from technical consultees, and there are numerous material considerations weighing in favour of the development. Next slide, please. We'd just now like to take this opportunity to address some of the concerns that have been raised. So as far as the proposed use is concerned, this will be a B&B with 24-hour on-site management. The applicants would also like to engage with the local community in regular consultation to foster a working relationship. In terms of traffic issues, there are parking controls in place around the application site. The site is also recognised as being accessible and benefits from public transport links. This is all recognised in the Highways consultation response. Irrespective of this, hotel staff will be trained to establish guest travel arrangements at the booking stage and advise accordingly to avoid undue traffic associated with the bed and breakfast. Procedures for this are contained within the hotel management plan. The issue of noise and disturbance has been raised. However, the hotel management plan does contain a robust strategy for the management of guests during their stay, including strict house rules governing behaviour. We must also reiterate that these proposals do not include for a bar, and draft conditions ensure that a bar cannot be implemented without express permission from the local planning authority. Finally, in respect of alternative uses away from a use class C1 bed and breakfast, any such development would represent a material change of use and therefore require full planning permission. As such, members are assessing a development that relates solely to guest accommodation as intended. Next slide, please. In concluding on this application, I would ask members to appreciate that the proposed development is in accordance with national and local planning policy, and that they recognise material considerations, as discussed above, that weigh significantly in favour of this development. Just an additional small point, if I may, Chair. The officer's report does duplicate the condition around cycle parking, so 15 and 17 are the same. I would ask that members agree that one of these conditions be removed, subject to your agreement. Thank you for your time, and I'll welcome any questions.
Are there any questions? Hello, any questions? I can hear somebody.
Hello,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, I'm not sure who's speaking though.
Hello, Tricia.
Yes, who's speaking, please?
Billy Mallet.
Okay, Billy, carry on.
Hello, David.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm Billy Mallet, one of the Anfield Ward councillors. We're just concerned that you haven't involved the likes of us councillors or any or community yet in this project, as far as I'm aware. A lot of people are made up what you're doing with Anfield Police Station and that you're keeping the old bill, but you've not been out to any of the councillors yet or the public and said, this is why we're doing it. It'll be safe, like you said about a bar and everything. You know, there won't be any bar. You haven't put people's minds at rest because they're worried about what hours this is going to be. Are people going to be coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning, David? You know, after being out.
Yeah.
The policy on time and everything.
What I would say to that is, Councillor, we did put a number of sort of packages of additional information out through Councillor Rosgroves. We were assured that those packages of information would be circulated to concerned parties. Basically, we set out ways to negate the planning submission that we made, including sort of making reference to the hotel management plan, things like operational concerns, and how we were looking to address concerns such as noise and disturbance. We appreciate we are living in close proximity to a lot of neighbours. As such, you know, we'd hope that the hotel management plan is a fluid document. We'd like to retain the sort of communication lines with neighbours and work with them to address any concerns going forward, not just now, but in the future.
Thank you.
So we do know from our agenda notes that Councillor Rosgroves was concerned. So I'm very pleased to hear that you have had a discussion with her. And I don't know if our planning officer might be able to say any more about that. Are there any other questions from the planning committee? Can I hand over to our planning officer now then, please?
Excuse me, I've got a question.
Carry on.
Can I ask a question?
Carry on.
Could I just ask a question in relation to the comments from the Merseyside police, who've advised certain measures to address issues of crime, but not all the suggestions have been acted on by the applicant? Can you just clarify what the applicants are going to do in relation to crime, the suggested recommendations by the police?
Yeah, I had a detailed conversation with the architectural liaison officer at Merseyside Police, and we sat and went through the plans in some detail. As you'll appreciate, we're dealing with the retrofitting of an existing building, so there are certain physical limitations. The measures that are within our gift have been implemented, i.e. sort of access control on doors. A scheme of CCTV will be going in. There is sort of a refuge area for staff, cash handling and all that's been sort of dealt with. The key one was sort of looking at how there's natural surveillance from the reception desk onto the front door, but having appreciated the sort of limitations of the building, Merseyside Police were content with what has been put forward.
So can I hand over to our planning officer now, please?
Yeah, I'm trying to get in here.
Who's trying to get in? Sorry.
Councillor Hanson.
Councillor Hanson, go ahead.
Yeah. In terms of, I'm in contact with Councillor Rosgroves, and the feedback I'm getting from, and apologies for Ros, she's not well today. The feedback from residents is one of, we don't want it, we don't need it, which flies straight in the face of what the developer is saying. But clearly, 26 people attending the match will be in the town, coming back 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and by definition, that will cause noise, nuisance, and antisocial behaviour, because that's the way of the world. So, whilst you may have stuff in place while they're inside the building, as they are arriving back from the town, to do whatever. So clearly, one councillor is extremely unhappy, that's Rosgroves, and she's fed back to say, so the discussions she's had with the residents, and the residents are unhappy as well. So it tends to fly in the face of what the developer is saying.
David, would you like to come back on that, or shall I hand over to our planner?
I suppose the only thing I can really say is I'm quite surprised at Councillor Groves' stance, given that the last few conversations I have had with her have all been very positive. I can't say any more than that.
Okay, can I hand over to our planning officer, please? Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just pick up the various points in the order that they were made. So obviously Councillor Marrett has raised some issues around wider consultation. I would simply emphasise that community consultation undertaken by the applicant is obviously over and above the statutory consultation that we've carried out. And obviously from the report you can see that we had quite a significant number of objections raised. Obviously, I'm pleased to hear that there has been some additional consultation undertaken by the applicants to try and allay some of the fears that have been raised, and I have nothing to add to what David Morse has already said in relation to that. In relation to Councillor Hanson's comments about concerns about noise and disturbance, again, we understand those. We're particularly aware of issues in and around the Anfield area, particularly with unmanaged facilities through the sort of Airbnb model, and we've throughout this application made it consistently clear to the applicants the importance of having a proper managed facility. And as you'll see, there are a number of conditions on there, as you've heard again from the applicant's agents, that try to restrict the way and manner in which this building can be used. And then finally, in relation to the issues around Merseyside Police and their comments, again, I have nothing to disagree with what the agent has said in relation to that. There was significant discussions around that particular issue. The applicants have liaised fully with Merseyside Police since they raised the initial concerns. A number of measures have been put into place, such as reducing the overall number of access points to the building so as to control movement in and out of the building, and you've heard CCTV and so on. And the issue that we have not been able to resolve is, as you've heard again from the agent, that issue about the reception area and the amount of space in front of it to provide surveillance. But because of the configuration of the building, we acknowledge that is challenging and are happy to recommend approval for the reasons set out in the report, Chair. Happy to answer any further questions.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, Chair. Brilliant, Madam.
Yeah, come on then.
Maybe, John, I should address this to David himself, but what one worrying aspect of David's report there was right at the very end where he said, if there was to be a change of plan, another planning application would have to be forwarded if they decide to change it from a B&B, and that's worrying the councillors in Anfield. The suggestion even now that that B&B might not last forever and it could be changed into something else. So I don't know what David wants to come back on that. I'm sorry for bringing it up to you, John, but maybe it's David. Okay. But that's worrying to us that there's already a comment made that if we wanted to alter this building, another planning application would have to be made.
Can I perhaps come back on that, please?
Yes, you can, David, and then I'll hand over to John.
Thanks very much for your comment. Hopefully I can allay concern. It was included in the presentation because it had been raised as an objection. It's contained within the officer's report as sort of a concern rather than perhaps an objection. And my point was that any sort of change of use away from the B&B would require full planning permission. I'm not setting out any intention for the applicants. They're very committed to what they're doing here. They live locally. They are really, really sort of committed to the project and really believe in it. My point was just to say that they're not. This isn't a stepping stone for them to then look to sort of use this as something other than what it's intended to do, and what you are assessing in front of you today.
Yeah, David, that was my worry that you had that you know right at the end saying like if that
worry.
I accept it. It's voted on today. You know the B&B. Yep.
Okay. Billy.
Yeah, could I
hand back to John, please?
Yeah. Could I just answer that, please? Is it okay to
No, I'm handing over to John. I'm handing over to our planning officer now. John.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I don't have anything to add to what David Morse has said there. I think the comment, as he's explained, was to try and reassure members that there would be further scrutiny of any particular changes to the application if indeed there was to be some changes in the future. But I'm satisfied with the response that's been provided, Chair.
Now, is there anybody else who wants to make any comment now?
Please.
Let me clear on that. Yes, come in, please.
Councillor Hanson. Yeah, in terms of the a licensed bar, the developer has said that they have no intention of having a bar on the premises. Is it written into the planning application that the premises would have to come back to planning to if they wish to install a bar of whatever nature into their premises?
John, can I hand over to you, please, on that?
I'm off mute. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes,
I can hear you, John.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, the simple answer is because it's an internal operation, it would not require planning permission. And so to that extent, we can't control the physical insertion of a bar. That would ultimately require a an application through the licensing process. So, because, as I say, because it's an internal alteration, the planning authority wouldn't be able to exercise control of the physical installation of a bar. However, you'll see that condition. Where is it? One of the conditions that we put on there is around the communal areas and so on. And so that, in our view, will limit the use of the non-residential space solely to the uses that are specified. So basically as an ancillary use associated with the hotel.
The applicants have said that if they wish to put a bar in there, they would come back and seek planning permission. Is there any way we can put a caveat in there that says to install a bar would be classed as change of use and have to come back through the planning process? And the reason I'm saying that, John, is because we've had in Kirkdale, we've had a bed and breakfast on the old Phoenix pub, as you may well remember. They went for a bed and breakfast, and now those comments were made about no bar, and now they've just put in a application to install, have permission to licensing for a bar.
Can I just make a quick comment? Sorry.
Yes, please, David. That might help.
Sorry, John. Sorry if I jumped in there. I apologise. I'd just like to reiterate that you know, the applicants would be more than happy to sort of have that role in place of the bar. This is, you know, there's no sort of disingenuous move here. They've got no interest in having a bar. And of course, any, you know, in terms of a bar, it's not a planning consideration, but they'd have to go through the licensing application as well, of course. So that's just something to bear in mind.
So to sum up, we have excuse me, I haven't finished either. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that David has said he would be happy to have a condition put in about a bar. Now I'll go over to you now, Councillor Hanson.
Thank you. As I was saying, John, so can we make sure that that's it, given what the applicant is saying, that if you want to put a bar in, they have to come back to planning, because tomorrow they may sell that business to somebody else and they will come in looking for a bar.
Chair, I'll respond to Councillor Hanson's point. I think that is possible. It might need some careful consideration, both with the applicant and possibly colleagues in legal service, to make sure it's drafted correctly. But if you, as a committee, are happy to approve it on the basis of a condition that restricts the implementation of a bar within the hotel, then I think we can move forward on that basis. I think it is possible. I can't provide you with the precise wording here and now, and maybe that's one that we can you can accept that we deal with under delegated powers, provided that the objectives of that are dealt with through the condition.
Just to come in, John, I just want to say I fully support Councillor Hanson's concerns, and I would imagine others on the committee would support that.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. So I'm going to hand over now to Michael Jones, because he can give us some legal advice. So can we include, when we approve, or if we approve this, Michael, that we delegate the power to the planning and legal departments to introduce a condition about the bar? Michael.
Thank you, Chair. By way of clarification, what John Hayes has indicated as a suitable option is permissible. Essentially, what you would need to require to move as Chair would be a resolution to approve the application as amended, subject to the grant of delegated authority to the head of planning to ultimately determine the application with the inclusion of a suitably worded condition restricting the ability of the applicant or future occupiers or owners of the premises to basically install any form of licensed bar facility without seeking the express consent of the local planning authority in the form of a subsequent application. The wording of that can be suitably agreed between legal services and the planning department. If you're happy with that as a resolution, you can seek to formally move that.
Mike, it's Sam, Chair. Can I just add a point as well, please?
Thank you, Sam. I'll bring you on now.
Please, Sam.
Thank you. Hi, Chair. Yeah, John's right, but we'd have to look into the legality of what's lawful and what's not. So can we amend the recommendation to include condition and/or agreement, please?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
I am now going to move that the recommendation be approved, subject to us delegating the power to planning and the legal department to introduce a condition or agreement that there is not to be a bar without it coming back to planning committee. Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. As per the previous items of business, I'll now conduct a vote by individual names. Turning firstly to Councillor Dave Cummings, I'm putting you on screen now. If you could unmute your mic and confirm your vote, please.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Now moving to Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hanson, I'm pinning you to the screen now. If you could confirm your vote with your mic unmuted, please.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Now move to Councillor Thompson. Just pinning you to the screen. If you could please unmute your mic and confirm your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'll now move on to Councillor Lavelle. Councillor Lavelle, if you could unmute your microphone and confirm your vote. Just reconfirm that, please.
Agreed.
Thank you. I'll now move to Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Kennedy, if you could unmute your microphone, please, and confirm your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. I'll now come to Councillor Marat. If you could unmute your microphone, please, and confirm your vote.
Again.
Thank you, Councillor Marat. Now come to Councillor Juarez. If you could unmute your microphone, please, and confirm your vote.
Agree.
Thank you, Councillor Juarez. I'll now move on to Councillor Conception. Councillor Conception, you're now on screen. If you could unmute your mic and confirm your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Conception. And lastly, we come to the Chair. If you could confirm your vote, please.
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. On that basis, the voting is therefore 8 in favour and 1 against, and the recommendation as amended is carried. Chair, if we can move to our next item of business, please.
Which is 35 Prospect Vale. And I'm a little unclear on this because I have John Crawley down, but I'm not sure if he's wishing to speak or not, because I also have there's no request from the applicant or agent to actually speak.
We
Hi
have
there.
an updated list of
Can you hear
Mr.
me?
Carney present.
Yes, Mr. Carney, that's correct.
And would you like to speak, Mr. Carney?
I can give a brief overview, yes.
Yes, if you would, yes.
Yeah, by all means, by all means. Thank you, committee, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak today. My name is John Carney. I'm an architect at Tract Architecture, and I am acting as agent on behalf of Red Plum Properties Limited. The site is located at 35 Prospect Vale, opposite Newsham Park, within the Newsham Park Conservation Area, and seeks to convert dilapidated Victorian property into 5 one-bed apartments. The property is in much need of restoration due to a tired aesthetic, poor internal condition and overgrown surrounding grounds. There are no extension works proposed in this scheme. As such, the style of the property and the conservation area will be retained. As recommended in the Conservation Officer's consultation, the proposals are deemed not to be unharmful to the setting of the Newsham Park Conservation Area. And any additional details, i.e. proposed additional windows, will be installed and detailed as per suggested condition 8 of the case officer's report in the style of the local vernacular, aiming to breathe life into a beautiful property without harming the character of Prospect Vale. In terms of objections, the main issues that have been raised are in relation to parking and security. Since these objections have been raised, I'll just check that's the right plan. Since these objections have been raised, the parking space has been omitted. Please note that the site's proximity to Prescott Road provides excellent transport links for local residents. And in replacement of the parking access that was previously included, a secure pedestrian gated fob access point will be installed to mitigate any potential through routes that may cause any concern in relation to antisocial behaviour. The property is in dire need of regeneration and will provide a positive contribution to the local street scene whilst complying with Liverpool's adopted policy and the council's design standards. As detailed in the committee report, Liverpool City Council's internal consultation have raised no objections to the proposals, and we look forward in anticipation to hopefully a positive determination today. So thank you for letting me speak, guys, and I welcome any questions.
Are there any questions? It would seem not. So can I now invite Gary Mcginty to address the committee? Have we got Gary there? Well, can I invite
Hello?
them?
Hello?
Hello, Gary.
Hello there.
Carry on and address the committee for up to 3 minutes.
That's no problem at all. Thanks a million for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I've just got one clarification that just for a point of order, really. Are we now accepted that the revised drawing just shown by what's his name now? I forgot his name. John. Sorry, John. That is the correct drawing going forward.
Yeah.
There is no vehicle access proposed now.
No vehicle access. No,
a lot of that was my concern, was the vehicle access. So rather go and talk about that again. I just want to point out condition 2 of the recommended grant of plan permission. Can we have that amended, please, to actually include that drawing? I think it's Rev C, because the conditions still refer to the previous drawing. That's possible. And just in relation to that, we still have concerns in relation to the pedestrian entrance for obvious reasons. I know John said there was going to be a fob, but unfortunately it'll be left to the residents of Haverstock Road to police this. It may really, might be unregulated. We can't control nighttime use. This property is literally 3 meters away from my front door, give or take an extra 2. And we have still concerns in relation to the rear access. Now, there is an existing pedestrian access within the controlled alley gate system, which is to the north of that drawing, shown by John, up the side of the bikes. And probably we could request that they may use that as a means of pedestrian access rather than actually open onto the Haverstock Road, because all residents in that area really have only access to the rear of the properties is through the controlled alley gate system for obvious reasons. This would be a precedent set in that actually you can access rear of a property from the public realm, essentially, and that would cause us concerns because we can't police this. And just one thing on that drawing is, I just noticed the drawing there is the wheelie bins are located at a much higher level than the actual entrance, and there's actually steps up and down to those wheelie bins. It's just to confirm, are the wheelie bins going out the rear entrance, or will they be brought to the front pavement to Prospect Vale? And I will, and just when I finish, you can talk then. And just I do accept John's argument that because of a close proximity to public transport, there is an abundance of on-street parking available on Prospect Vale, that the council should consider relaxing the requirement of parking in this instance, because then it would alleviate the requirement for a rear entrance off Haverstock Road, which would be out of precedent, out of character with the area. I have my own issue in terms of the mix of flats. My only concern is that sustainability doesn't mean convert everything to 1-bedroom flats. Sustainability is sustainability in the long run. Maybe a more desirable mix of apartments, maybe a 3-bedroom apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment, may be more progressive and sustainable in the future, given that all adjoining houses on Prospect Vale are predominantly single or semi-detached large family dwelling houses, and which has moved that in the previous years. There was flats, I will accept there was apartments and flats, but in the previous years there have been a number of conversions back to family large independent family homes. And again, by putting 5 small flats, which is kind of out of character with the area, may upset the imbalance that would trigger a further conversion and a further conversion. Before we know it, we're back to multiple single small units within a very unique area within Liverpool at the moment. And really, that's all to conclude. As long as the condition 2 is amended to include Rev C, the drawing that John previously drawn, I'd be happy with that, essentially. Thank you for your time.
Can I just quickly comment on that, just to put Gary's mind at rest in a few areas? In terms of
it's not the usual, excuse me a minute, it's not usual to just have a to and fro. So
apologies,
what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite the other person who wants to speak. Then we will hand over to the planning officer, and if the matters are not addressed satisfactorily, I'm going to call you back, if I may, John.
Yeah.
Is that all right? That's the
Yes,
usual way we do things. So I'd like to call on now Ray Bolter to address the committee, please.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, it's Roy, not Ray. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I've been resident in 33 Prospect Vale for 30 years. My property is next door. For the 25 of the 30 years that we've been here, that was a single family home. For the last 5 years, it's been empty and semi-derelict. So actually, I do welcome the fact it's being developed. But I'm really concerned about the 5 flats. For those that don't know Prospect Vale, where we are, it's a very quiet cul-de-sac, mainly family homes. But in recent years, there's been some HMOs opened up, which has sort of changed the character of the road. So further traffic and further residents are a concern for us. We've been told by other parties that this is aimed at 5 professional flats for professional couples. If that's the case, then that could be up to 10 vehicles, which is a concern. I support the fact that the Haverstock Road entrance has changed, but I'm really concerned about the pedestrian access. For the last 5 years, I've been more or less the security guard for that house next door, who was never on site, just let the house fall into ruin. I've spent the last 5 years chasing people cutting through, substance abuse users that have been in the house. I've stopped it being broken into twice. So, you know, I do welcome this this change of purpose, but to have 5 flats up to 10 people is a real concern, and I'd like to be reassured that it won't go further than that. And I'd also like to question, you know, it's a big house, but 5 flats, it to me seems excessive.
Thank you, Roy. I'm going to hand over to our planning officer now, who will address some of these issues. And if we still need some clarification from John Carney, we'll go back to him. But it's over to the planning officer. John, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, you've got a full report in front of you, which I think addresses most of the issues that have been raised by the 2 objectors there. The first point is to reassure the first speaker that the amendment has been made. There is a tabled update note that's been circulated to you as members, which references the new plan and the revision C accordingly. So absolutely assure the first speaker that parking bay that was coming off Haverstock Road has now been removed. In relation to the proposed pedestrian access, again, I understand the point that's being raised that most of the rear accesses are onto the gated alleyway. Unusually, this property backs onto the head of a cul-de-sac effectively, and therefore accesses directly onto the street. However, given the relatively small number of flats proposed, and that there is alternative access from the front, I don't necessarily perceive the problems to be as significant as perhaps the local residents do. there's no reason why they wouldn't be equally concerned about their own security within the flats, and hopefully that gate shouldn't present any particular problems. In relation to car parking, yes, there is. The scheme doesn't provide any car parking space now. The one space that was being provided, what has now been deleted. So the space that would be available would have to be on street. However, your officers, including those in highways, are satisfied that the street can accommodate that additional traffic without any undue impact on highway safety or indeed residential amenity. It's also worth bearing in mind that because this is in a conservation area, it is important to try and maintain the areas to the front as gardens and open spaces, and keep the boundary walls, because they all contribute to the character of the conservation. So that has been an issue for us as officers when we've been considering this application. Again, in terms of the number of flats, it's not set out in detail in your report, but we are satisfied that the overall the size of the accommodation meets your SPG standards. They're actually quite generous, if I recall, in terms of the overall floor space. Certainly they're well in excess of the standards set out in your SPG. And again, we're satisfied that a property of this size can satisfactorily accommodate 5 flats. So for all of those reasons, Chair, we're happy to recommend approval subject to that amended plan, and happy to answer any particular questions. I'm not sure whether you want to ask the architect if he's got any particular other points that he wants to add, but happy to answer any questions, Chair.
So I don't know if you do want to come in, John. I do think the matters have been addressed myself, but is there anything else you'd like to say, John?
Just in response to Gary's query about the refuse, yes, it will be taken out as Prospect Vale.
Carry on, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was originally on the lower level, which is obviously going to cause issues. So I've raised the level of the bins, so it's taken out to the front.
Okay, and can I invite any questions from our planning committee members now, please?
Can I ask another question, please?
No, I'm sorry, it's from planning committee members now. Are there any planning committee members who'd like to have a question answered? In that case, I'm going to move on to the recommendation. And the recommendation is, just bear with me, I have to keep swapping around. The recommendation on this one is, can I move that the recommendation as amended be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. In accordance with the procedure as per previous items of business, and I'll go through members individually. Firstly, Councillor Cummings, please confirm your vote and have your mic on, please.
Great.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Councillor Hanson next. I'm just pinning you to screen. Can you unmute your microphone and confirm your vote?
Agreed.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Thompson next. Please confirm your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Lavelle next. Confirm your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy next. If you could confirm your vote, please, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Kennedy is absent, so no vote will be taken from Councillor Kennedy. Moving to Councillor Marat. Could you just unmute your mic, please, Councillor Marat? Just reconfirm, please.
Agreed.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Juarez. Councillor Juarez.
Agree.
Thank you. Councillor Conception. Please confirm your vote, Tony.
Agreed.
And the chair, please, if I may.
Can you come back to me?
I'll come back to you now, Malcolm. Thank you.
Yes, I'm agreeing. I agree.
Thank you. That concludes voting on this application. Just to confirm the outcome of the vote, that is 9 in favour, none against. Therefore, the application, subject to those amendments, is approved.
Thank you.
And can we go on now to agenda item 8, which is 108 Edinburgh Road, Liverpool 7.
Chair, before we
Yes,
proceed,
carry on.
in terms of the technical limitations on virtual meetings, we have a defined time span within which we must conduct our proceedings. At this juncture, I need to report to yourself and members that agenda item 11 has a large number of members of the public registered to speak, and a request that from individuals concerned that this item be brought forward and considered now to ensure it is determined today.
Well, as long as that's agreeable to the committee, yes.
Do members have any comments, or are you happy for us to proceed and take item 11 now? If there's no comments, we'll proceed with item 11. Thank you. In which case, we'll move straight on to item 11, for which there are a number of speakers, and we'll start firstly with the applicant and their agent. Could I remind Mr. Nicholson and Ms. Hakello, the agent and applicant, that you'll need to unmute your mic to speak, and if there's a presentation, that's going to be displayed on screen now for you.
I'd like to come in here now because I seem to have Mr. Nicholson and Naomi Carlo to speak. Yes, is that correct?
Yes.
So Mr. Nicholson first then? Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Carry on.
Guy Nicholson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, but
Thank
you're
you.
not that loud.
Apologies. I'll speak as loud as I can.
Yes, that's much better.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to address the committee in these challenging times. I'm Guy Nicholson, a chartered electrical engineer and head of grid integration at Statkraft UK. Statkraft is owned by the Norwegian government and is the largest renewable energy generator in Europe. Statkraft owns batteries, wind and hydro power stations in the British Isles and is investing £600 million in the UK in the next 5 years. The planning proposal you see before you by Statkraft at Carnegie Road is for batteries and energy management infrastructure and is deliberately sited adjacent to the National Grid Lister Drive substation. I'm aware of several objections to our proposal based on the use of the site for a cart boot sale at present. Statkraft takes great care to ensure that we have the legal rights to use and access any site which we develop, and we have ensured that we have negotiated those rights at Carnegie Road. So let's move to the purpose of our application. Integrating renewable energy into the electricity grid is a growing challenge as the volume of renewable energy increases and as old power stations close. For example, on Easter Monday, National Grid had sufficient renewable energy to supply the whole demand of the entire electricity grid, but it needed to turn on 17 fossil fuel power stations to keep the grid stable, which resulted in burning excessive fossil fuels and CO2 emissions. So National Grid is looking for new ways of stabilising the grid without burning fossil fuel. And this is relevant regionally as Fiddler's Ferry Power Station in Warrington closed at the end of March. In January, Statkraft won 2 contracts with National Grid to provide stability services without burning fossil fuels. These sites at Lister Drive have been developed to satisfy these contracts, which will enable greater and faster decarbonisation of our energy supplies and help meet our net zero target. I'll now hand over to Naomi from our planning consultants, Arcus.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Naomi, I can hear you clearly.
Thank you. And could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. Hello, I'm Naomi Hakelo, a chartered planner with Arcus Consultancy Services and the agent for this application. As mentioned by the applicant, there is a national and local need for this type of essential development. Carnegie Road has been identified following an assessment of sites throughout the country and the Greater Liverpool area. We are pleased to see that this is reflected in your planning officer's recommendation for approval. There are limited locations for siting this kind of development. The site is adjacent to the National Grid substation, which will prevent the need for lengthy transmission cables and enables efficient transmission to and from the National Grid. You can see on the plan on the slide that the National Grid substation is just to the left of the red line area, so that's how close the facility is. Brownfield land is in an industrial area is more appropriate for this facility than residential or countryside locations. The proposed use is compatible with the local plan designation of primarily industrial area as confirmed in the officer's report. And could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. The site is currently used for container storage and there is no formal employment at the site. The site has been used for a twice-weekly car boot sale, although we note that this will no longer be proceeding, regardless of whether this development goes ahead. I would like to reiterate that there are no alternative sites for this essential infrastructure, which needs to be adjacent to the substation. Could you move to the next slide, please? And you can see the substation infrastructure just to the rear of the containers there. The applicant has engaged proactively with the council through a pre-application inquiry. The development will not have any adverse effects on the environment or residential amenity, as confirmed in the officer's recommendation for approval. No objections have been received from technical or statutory consultees, further demonstrating that this is an appropriate site for the application. Could you move to the next slide, please? And that's just the entrance along Carnegie Road. That wall that you see there will be replaced by a palisade fencing for security purposes. As stated in the officer's report, the facility would improve existing operational public utilities and is therefore directly supported by Local Plan Policy EP 14. The development complies fully with all relevant local and national planning policies. Finally, this development will facilitate the efficient use of renewable energy and help to reduce Liverpool's carbon footprint in light of the climate emergency, which was declared in Liverpool last year. This declaration confirms that Liverpool City Council is supportive of carbon-free energy initiatives and the low-carbon economy. The application will also contribute to meeting the UK's commitment under the Climate Change Act to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2050 and help to implement the UK's National Energy and Climate Plan, which states that additional energy storage and system balancing development is required. There are no planning reasons why this development should not be approved, and as recommended, we therefore respectfully request that consent is granted. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can I now ask the planning committee if they've got any questions for those two presenters?
Yeah.
Come in, please, whoever it is.
I'll go first, David Cummings.
Right, Dave, go on.
Could you confirm what, if any, employment opportunities will be in this project?
Is Guy or Naomi going to answer that one?
I can answer.
Okay, Naomi, you go ahead.
The proposed development, it will result in approximately 60 construction jobs during the peak of construction, and 4 operational jobs to operate the development. I would also like to note that currently there's no formal employment at the site, so it can't be considered to be used in an employment use.
When it's in use, if it's in use and it gets the planning permission, what would be the process for recruitment locally?
I'm not aware of that. I might hand that over to Guy if he can provide any details as the applicant.
Guy, if you'd like to come in here, please.
Yeah, so this is specialist equipment, so that would be down to the contractors that we would bring in to run the project. But we'd make sure that any jobs that were involved with the site were advertised locally.
Thank you, Guy. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just seeking confirmation. Yeah, I'm just seeking confirmation on this. So with regard to the construction of the project, that will be taken forward by local contractors. Can you confirm that?
I can't confirm that it will definitely be carried out by local contractors. This is specialised work, but we would expect the contractor appointed to involve local subcontractors as appropriate, and we would expect that to bring some income to the local economy in terms of contractors needing to stay locally, or services that they are required to bring to the project, which can be provided locally. They would certainly choose local services where they are available. Yes.
Thank you, Guy. Are there any other questions?
Hi, am I able to speak?
Only people who are members of the planning committee.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait then.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I'd like now to start on our fairly extensive list of people that I have here who wish to speak. I'd like to remind you all that you need to make separate points, not the same point, and that we would like you to address planning issues only, please. So can I invite, first of all, Natik Fatah Iliev, I've probably said that wrong. Natif, please.
Chair, I've checked the list. I can't see them present, so our next speaker would be, I believe, Adeliki Balakun.
Yes, please. If they'd like to speak.
And councillors.
Yes, we can hear you.
I believe people, the occupiers of this particular property, they've been there for a longer time, and they've been contributing to the economy of the local area, preventing crime and bringing the locals together. Taking the property away from them will render them their livelihood void. Number two, it will expose the area to criminal activities. And therefore, that's why I'm objecting. That's why I'm against the project.
Me too.
And I wouldn't want the livelihood of the locals taken away from them, because this is what they've been doing. And if that is going to happen, what alternative have you got in place for the locals who have been on this property over these years?
Right. Then I've got somebody else in the background who seems to be speaking as well. I don't know where that is coming from. No. So
if I could just, Chair, if I can just intervene.
Yes, please,
I'm going to mute all speakers at this point. And at this stage, I will apply the mute and will remind everyone that to only speak when requested to do so by the chair, one person at a time, so everyone can hear clearly. Based on our list, our next speaker is a Mr. Stephen Dyro. So if the chair would nod agreement, I will bring them in now and pin them to screen and ask them to unmute their microphone.
Stephen Dyro.
Guys?
Yes. Hello?
Carry on, Stephen, we can hear you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Stephen Dyro. I'm the current occupier of this place, and I'm strongly against this application on the basis that I've been on this place for more than 22 years since I got to England, and I am a British citizen, and since I've been to this place over 22, have been working, paying tax, and involved a lot of employees. In the past, I've employed more than 1,000 employees in the local area in Liverpool. So, and at the same time, at the moment, the market that I'm organizing that involves a local people, and to the extent that weekly, it brings nearly about 800 to 1,000 community together. A lot of them comes in to socialize. Some elderly people that they don't have people to visit them at home, they see this market for the past 30 years as a place where they find their happiness. So, and at the same time, because of these effects on the community, yes, that is why I'm strongly against this application. And at the end, again, I will still lie because I've been here over 22 years, and I actually built half of this warehouse. And the landlord, he have not organized with me to settle me. The other, I've not had anything from the company that is coming to take over, which they are trying to use their being a big company. They are trying to oppress a company that has been here for 22 years. They are coming to take that opportunity, and they don't want to consider the people that they are actually in this system. And under me, I have about nearly 70 tenants under me, 70 tenants, which they are doing, they are all local, they are doing their small businesses. They keep their family together. So taking all this in away is going to be too much on the community. And that is why I'm strongly against this application. It will be unfair if they just come to Liverpool and to take away what I've built for 22 years. Because I've built this place for over 22 years with all my life, with my family. I've never been a jobless person. I've always paid my tax, and at the same time, I'm always employ people, create a lot of things to the community. So that is why I'm struggling against this application until they sort me out. Because if they sort me out, then that will be good.
Thank you, Stephen. So
Yeah.
Can we have Charlie Hale next, please?
Chair, I believe we have James Rowley first. Jimmy Rowley.
That's correct, Mike. So Jimmy Rowley next, and then Charlie Hale.
Hello, hi, I'm Charlie Hale. What I'm more concerned about is we use this as storage for our business. And there's a lot of people who do that. And I'm worried about where we all meant to go. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. So I'm worried about where we all meant to go and how long and time do we have to do this in, which is quite concerning, really.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. I'd like to invite Jimmy Rowley now. Jimmy, would you like to speak now, please?
Mr. Rowley, can you unmute your microphone if you can hear this, please, so we can hear you?
Well, that does not seem to be working, even though I've got Jimmy Rowley's initials up on the screen as if he is present in the meeting. Shall we go on to the next objector and try and get Jimmy back later, Mike?
I would suggest we do, yes, Chair.
Yeah.
Mr. Rowley hasn't unmuted his microphone.
Okay,
So moving to our
so
next
we'll
one.
have Lawrence Murphy now, please. Lawrence? Lawrence, are you there?
I can't see them present on our
No,
list,
that's
Chair.
fine. So can we move on to Jeffrey Goody, please? Jeffrey Goody?
Again, I don't believe Mr. Goody's present, Chair. So I suggest we move on to our next speaker.
Which would be Collins Dyro.
Mr. Dyro, you're now on screen. If you could unmute your microphone, thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Carry on.
All right, so basically, I strongly oppose against this application on the basis that the current occupier is being settled there for the past 22 years. It would seem that the current occupier has welcomed over 1,000 employees during this whole duration of him being there, and currently he has 78 tenants. I will repeat that. Currently, he has 78 tenants. So that means that they have financial leases towards the property. And that has been done for, they wanted to continue that for the future. So what I would say is that the current proposal would have their warehouse shut down, and the erect management would the company would take over. Now, my thing is, the current company that wants to take over, they have not sorted out negotiations. So one of the speakers said that negotiations was sorted with the landlord, but I'm strongly against that. I would disagree, because any professional company would have to sort out negotiations with the occupier, not just the landlord. I'll explicitly say that again. So negotiations, even though the landlord owns the property, he has rented it out, and the current occupier has been 22 years. So therefore, it only makes sense for the company to go and negotiate not just with the landlord, but with the occupier. But instead, no talks and negotiations have taken place between the current occupier. So that is one reason why I'm strongly against it. Another reason.
Okay. Excuse me, you've made yourself clear on that one, but I don't think it's a planning issue. But you've got another reason, so you go ahead with that.
Okay, so I was going to say, so the current company that wants to take place, I was listening to the speakers, and they said that they're going to have 4 management jobs. Now, that will not help and benefit the community, because taking away 78 people and their financial ties to the company to replace it with 4, the numbers don't really add up there. And in terms of one of the speakers said that 60 people will be 60 construction working jobs. But then when the other speaker pressed him on it and asked him whether they could be tied down to the local community and the local construction community, he couldn't confirm that. So again, that is then suggesting that, well, he has no control over if it's going to go. So there's no certainty towards what will help the community, and and that's then I would also like to say that the crime rate of the crime rate of the community. So over the years, the crime rate was high in the past, and because of the current business and the car boot sale. So the current car boot sale, as I said, I don't want to repeat that, but it has 78 people, and that's plus. So many people from the community come in, and the crime over the years has it used to be very prominent before, because the warehouse was set out on fire many times, and even like the police have actually stated that that area was very prone to crime. Like there's even situations where people were stealing cars and stuff like that. However, as the community has gotten closer, just solely due to the company, the current occupier, because tenants from different houses. Pardon? I can see someone's. Sorry, someone's muted.
You need to draw your remarks to a conclusion now, if you would.
All right. So, I was saying that yes, basically the crime rate has changed, and that is just due to the current occupier, because the community have gotten closer, and because the people, even because the community and the residents can come to the market and invest their money and generate income for their families. Therefore, it makes sense that the crime rate is going to go down, because if the general as a whole, the local community has more money, then there's not going to be a need to do certain things. And yeah, I would just propose, I'm going to draw that to a conclusion, but I would just propose that if the application does go through, that the current occupier has to be settled with an agreement, a financial agreement, because what's going to happen to the local tenants, the 78 current local
Sorry,
tenants?
We've got your points now, Collins, but you know, we have to deal with planning issues, and they are matters of tenancy. But I'm sure our planning officer will further on that, and our legal advisors. So I'd like to invite now Funmi Dairo to speak, please. Funmi, are you here to speak now?
Yes, hello. Hello.
Carry on. Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. Oh, thanks for allowing me to be in this meeting this morning. I mean, most of the things that I was going to talk about is already been mentioned by the previous people that have talked. I am talking this morning to oppose this application. And for me, there's a lot of worry about this application, and I know Collins has mentioned it as well. Naomi mentioned that they only have 4 operational things that will be looking into that. That is a lot of worry for a place that is being secluded and is being exposed to a lot of crime, a lot of antisocial behaviors. And leaving 4 people and a battery charge in that area is just going to start all over again and put all the residents in danger. Also, I'm just seriously worried about the danger. I know, you know, probably in the application they've explained you know, the danger and everything about this battery, because I'm not used to battery. I don't know much about it. But what I know is that I'm not really convinced about the danger this is going to pose to the community around there, and also the noise from this battery. I'm not sure whether this is appropriate, because Naomi was presenting the place as is a predominantly a industrial area. Naomi has forgotten that there's lots of residential areas surrounding this place, so it's not just predominantly a place where it's all factories there. So granting this application is going to be that cause a lot of problem for this area. And let's leave the aspect about the landlord and the current tenants as separate. But what about the community? What about the mental effect of this on the community? What about the social aspect of it on the community? What about this? Where is our spirit of community going in Liverpool if everything is now being replaced by battery, by everything, and taking the liberty of the community away from them by force, by fire? This is not right. People should be allowed to continue in the spirit, to continue to be happy. I'm demanding that because of this COVID-19. We've been through a lot, and bringing these people to now depress people who are already depressed with the effect of COVID-19, that is not good. So I want the council to consider all this and look thoroughly into the application and make sure, is this what we wanted? And I'm not sure about what Naomi is saying, that the current use of market on the land it's not on anymore. No, it is on. I do not agree. I think that's a propaganda for Naomi to come and say that. So I want the council to thoroughly look into all the objections of this application before they consider it. And if they consider it, they need to make other alternative marketplace for the residential areas and the community. Thank you.
Thank you for me. But it isn't actually part of the planning process that we have to provide an alternative. I'd like to make that clear. Vincent Brown now, please. Vincent, would you like to carry on? We can see you. We don't know if we can hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Right, I did press a button. Right, there's a couple of instances when they put the application is first. He said negotiated rights. Well, I'm aware he hasn't negotiated with the present occupier. So for him to negotiate with the owner, surely the occupier should be included. He also said the markets would discontinue anyway, regardless of this application. Well, that's, as far as I know, is a lie. The markets are going to continue. There's no car boot sales around the area. They've all been going. So it is a local meeting point and socialising and what have you. He's been there for over 20 years. I've actually had storage in there since about 98, which that makes it 22 years. I own the shop and I need the storage there. I don't really want to go elsewhere. There's 78 tenants, containers tenants, all them container tenants. It goes to show you that the application is the most opposed of all the applications that have been on today. And this suggests that it's not welcome. So I totally oppose it, and hopefully it gets rejected.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for letting
me
speak.
Carry on now to Anthony Steer. Anthony?
We don't appear to have Mr. Steer present, Chair.
Not present, right. Well, we now have, I'll have problems saying this one, Ed Bay Amy, Stephen Dyro. Is he present to speak?
I believe we may already heard from Mr. Dyro earlier on, I believe.
Person. Well, it's a different very first name. So we're on to Natalie Reeves Billing.
Hello.
If Natalie would like to speak.
Just to say something, sorry. There's two Stephen Dyros. There's one which is spoken already, and then I'm waiting to speak. So I think.
Well, if you'd like to speak now, the second Stephen.
Okay. Yes, I'll be quick.
Thank you.
I think most of the points have already been said. I don't overlap what's been said. But I think the main concern is just based on the community, because as the current situation we're in right now, coronavirus is quite a strong thing, and it's showing the importance of good mental health. And for a lot of people, elderly people, they can't show that. And coming to the market and coming to a place where they can see their friends, where they normally wouldn't come out, that's the way to socialize. And for them, it may not be seen by a lot of the community, but that's a very good way to improve their mental health, to get socialized and to help them live longer. And I said before, I think it's already been said that when Naomi said that the car boot sale is not continuing, that obviously isn't the case, because right now, because the coronavirus isn't continuing because of obvious social distancing laws. But before then and when it finishes, it's going to continue. And just in general, like I understand that there's always a need for renewable power plants, renewable stuff, because that is the way forward. But you have to look at what you're taking away from the community as well as what you're bringing to it. And I think with this application, it's a very sensitive application. The community, especially with the past crime rate the way it was before, fly tipping was a major issue. Fly tipping has decreased immensely due to surveillance of the current occupier, and the police, as I said, can probably back that, how a lot of things have dropped. So just for the council to consider everything, and to ensure that if the application is approved, of how these problems can be also sorted out as well. But yeah, I agree that it should be like stick to planning aspects. But thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Can we now have Natalie Reid spilling, please?
We don't appear to have a present chair.
Right, so it's then Tess O'Hara. Is Tess around?
Not chair, doesn't appear to be present.
And then there's Lynn Walker.
No chair. That's our last speaker then, therefore.
So that's the last speaker. And I think I've nearly lost the plot now, but I think we're ready to go over to our planning officer now.
Hello. That's correct, Chair. Yes, we are now.
Yeah, so if we could pass over to our planning officer, and then we'll take any questions
Julius.
from members of the
Hello.
planning committee. Yes.
Hello.
Come in.
Hi, my name is Julius Jemmy, and thought I was registered to talk as well, but please
Well,
could you help me
Michael,
check?
Michael, if you would check, because I haven't got this name down.
Julius, could you just confirm your full name, please?
Julius Olugbenga Yemi.
I don't appear to have you. I don't appear to have you on my list, but if you've had the invite, then yes, you do have the opportunity to speak briefly, Chair.
Julius,
Okay.
You
I'm
can
gonna-
speak, but
All
can
right.
you keep it to planning issues, please?
I
And
will do.
something's not been said before, please.
I will do. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm actually a partner to Yemi Dairo that spoke. I own the container business, and as it's been highlighted, we have not been contacted at all by the owner, and I have an agreement with some of the tenants. Like they said, we have over 75 tenants, and I have an agreement with them up to 2024. This is because the landlord has kept the lease open, and we've been here for a very long time. Right. Another thing I would like to say is there are over 347 national grid substations in the UK by research. And one question I keep asking myself is why this development in our local community? I look at the application that they put through, I read them thoroughly, and I discovered that the developer mentioned that this is the first of its kind, the first of the energy management center in the UK. Is this another dump site for us? Has this technology been proven anywhere? We know battery storage, we know it's a proven technology, but when from the application, it's going to be a two-way communication, which is unique. This makes this application unique. So therefore, I'm asking, if this is not the only location that is close to the national grid in the UK, can the developer explain why they've picked this site? Because there are other sites in the UK where the national grid, there is vast land, there are vast amount of land close to the site, which are mainly, they are even on the motorways. We've seen that, and that's one. And also, the developer mentioned that there is no noise effect. As far as I'm aware, I looked at the application, and there is no environmental impact assessment has not been considered for this application. The statement they made cannot be true, because I am an engineer by training, and I know the decibel for these coolers they put on there, the batteries, they need to get the temperature down, and they will need those fans to cool them down. That generates noise. It generates noise, and there are hazardous factors as well. The discharge from the battery, where are they going to store it? Is it going to be, this business has helped to keep waste off our sites? Now, if this application, if it's granted, the implication is I know people have talked about dump site fly tipping. The implication is that we're going to be some of the ways that this site has been taken care of, that we normally take care of while on this site. We will start seeing them on the street. We'll start seeing them on the sea. Again, in conclusion as well, this business brings the market itself, brings people together every Sunday. It's a livelihood for us. It's an opportunity.
With respect, Julius, this point has been made about the socialisation. Are there any other points that you've got that haven't been dealt with before, Julius?
Yes, the last one is the recycling part of our business. I'm not sure if you are aware that this site manages a recycle plant, a mini recycle plant here, and we move items like clothing and toys down to various countries in the world, in Asia and in Africa. And we do, if we stop this, we don't know how to explain to those kids or those people somewhere around the world whose minimum wage is less than $1 a day, that could not afford brand new clothes, and all they depends on is these services that we offer. Please, on this basis, I would like the councillors to look into this application critically and understand the impact on our society, on the globe as well, because it's not only in the UK, it affects people in other parts of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julius. But I do need to stress, and I'm sure my planning officer will do likewise, that we only deal with town planning law and the unitary development plan, which is a land use issue, not about the leasing or buying and selling of land. But I'll hand over now to our planning officer. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chairman. Can everybody see and hear me? Chair.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yes, John, we can.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, you've had a very detailed presentation. There's a substantial report in front of you. Can I also draw to members' attention the additional tabled update note, which includes quite a number of later representations, but also include a letter from the solicitors who are acting on behalf of the owners, in which they address some of the issues that you've heard about the lease arrangements, and in particular, the point that the premises were offered to sale to the current occupiers. That is on your tabled note. Chair, obviously this has raised quite a lot of objections, and it's clearly an important community facility that provides employment for quite a number of people. The issue, there's two sort of overlapping issues. One is the loss of the business as a consequence of the tenancy arrangements and the lease arrangements that are currently in place. That ultimately is a matter between the owner of the building, the main leaseholder, and the tenants that are then within the building. There is nothing that you as a planning authority can do to prevent the owner deciding on a alternative use for that building. So, for example, the tenants and the owner would be in exactly the same predicament if, for example, the current owner decided to have a different occupier providing for long-term storage of containers or whatever. So there's nothing that you can do to prevent that from happening. However, what you are entitled to consider in terms of land use planning matters is whether or not the loss of this employment site is acceptable. And that's the crux of the issue here going forward. Clearly, the proposal is limited in terms of the job opportunities it provides because it is simply for battery storage. You've heard from the applicant talk about the 60 jobs that it would provide and the 4 permanent jobs it would provide. Your offer, the planning issue, as I say, is straightforward. It's whether or not the loss of employment land is considered appropriate, having regard to the benefits that would accrue from having battery storage and the sustainability benefits that accrue from that. I would point out that a very similar facility has been approved and I think implemented on the opposite side of the road. You've heard from the applicant as to why the site needs to be in the location that it is. There are very few sites like this across the country, is my understanding, that can provide this opportunity, and that's partly the reason why this has been selected. Just picking up a couple of the other points that have been raised, particularly by the last speaker, about noise. Again, this is entirely within an industrial area. There shouldn't be any reason why the batteries themselves would create noise over and above that is associated with the existing use of the surrounding land. As far as I'm aware, at most it's a slight hum that comes from the facility. But again, that might be something that the applicant pick up later. And then in terms of crime and disorder, again, you've heard a number of people talk about that. There's no reason in your officer's view why this would of itself cause additional harm. I understand the point that is being made about the existing facility providing a community resource, and that has helped to alleviate some crime, the occupants of the building and so on. But I go back to the point that I made at the beginning, that there is nothing that you as a planning authority can do to control the overall occupancy of that building. You can, however, consider whether or not the loss of the employment land is appropriate, and that ultimately is a matter for you as the members of this committee. Your officer's view is clear in this report that on balance the use of the land for battery storage is appropriate. Happy to answer any further questions, Chair.
Yeah, I would like to ask a question to John.
Go ahead, Councillor Cummings.
Thanks, Chair. Just to come back to the point that you mentioned, John, about the implication of, at this moment, the amount of employment and economic activity is going on that site now, compared to what will happen if this planning application is accepted. On that point, from my perspective, I would not want to support this planning application as a consequence of the lack of economic activity would go on, whereby the local area, that economic activity is going on, which I fully support. Of course, I believe in renewable energy, and I want to state that straight away. So what my concern would be is, surely there could be a delay on this to see if the establishment which is there now could find somewhere else. Now, I don't know whether that can be done, but I will still state that I will not support this application in the context of the lack of economic activity that will go on compared to what is happening now.
Would you like to comment on that, John? And then I'll see if there are any other questions.
Chair, I think Councillor Cummings was making a point rather than asking a specific question. And I think his point is a reasonable one. As I said, it's ultimately a matter for you as the planning committee to consider the implications of the loss of employment land in relation to this proposal. I think that's the point that Councillor Cummings was trying to emphasise.
So are there any other questions?
Yes, please, Chair.
Who's this from?
Malcolm.
Malcolm, carry on.
The question I have for John is, I mean, I've been listening very carefully, and I did hear the number of 78 tenants, and it did strike me that what we were talking about here was not so much a car boot sale as a market. And so the question I have is whether the planning officer is aware of whether this market is actually licensed. The reason I ask that is because of my past knowledge of how markets operate in Liverpool. I would have thought that an option for would have been referred to as tenants on the site would have alternatives available with them within the official market system.
John, did you hear that clearly enough?
I did hear that, Chairman. The answer is yes, it does have a markets licence. We've consulted with our markets officer, and she has confirmed that the premises do have a licence, and that has been in place for quite a number of years now.
Okay, that's good clarification. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up on that then, Malcolm? No? Are there any other questions?
I think what the point I'm making, Chair, is that there's obviously, I think, the markets in Liverpool will have a responsibility to deal with the matter where a piece of land that they have licensed is no longer available, but they have effectively tenants who are paying a fee to them for the right to trade as market traders in the city. It's maybe not a planning point, but I do think following on from this, that Liverpool markets should take some responsibility for the situation.
Malcolm, could that responsibility extend to finding an alternative site, for instance? Or would it just be there be a refund? Would you be able to enlighten us on?
I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Right.
I'm no longer responsible for markets, but certainly either finding an alternative site, I would have taken as a personal responsibility if I was still in that position.
Are there any other questions?
Chair?
Yes, Myrna, if you'd like to come in.
I just want to make a comment, really, similar to what Councillor Cummings made, that I don't feel comfortable with the loss of this employment land. Although, the proposed site is of high importance to the applicant today because of its location to the proximity of the national grid. Nevertheless, there is a big difference with the amount of employable opportunities it creates at present. Maybe we need to defer this application till suitable preparations have been made by the current persons as operating this market facilities at that location, because I think 70 jobs, 70 opportunities are quite it's quite a significant number to me.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Juarez, but you do realise that is not part of our planning committee responsibilities. I don't know if the legal department would like to comment on that, but it isn't part of planning committee's remit as far as I have ever understood it.
Thank you, Chair. Briefly, in terms of what the committee can and can't consider, but essentially you can consider relevant planning matters, but what you have control over ultimately in this committee is the determination of the application before you. In terms of matters relating to the market licenses or other agreements which operate, these are governed by secondary legal processes which are not determined through the planning committee process. In terms of what's required of you today, it's ultimately to determine the application before you based on the information provided.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, just to come back to what Mike has just said. Mike, could you please confirm with me on the issue that was raised by John about the the employment land issue. Can we defer or can we reject it on those issues? As I've said, there is more employment, economic activity on that piece of land now than what will be later on if this proposal is accepted. I support the proposal as to what it's about, but I have the concerns about the downturn in economic activity for local people there, and that's why I would support that issue. Is that acceptable to do that in this concept?
As a member, you could legitimately move forward a proposal to refuse the application on the basis that its impact would result in the loss of employment, land and facilities. However, that's your discretion as an individual member. And a resolution to refuse an application of committee, note that would require the application then going forward to a further meeting for any such resolution to be reviewed and either confirmed or otherwise set aside in favour of approval of the application, but it's at your discretion.
Mike, I would like to formally do that right here and now then.
Yeah, can I suggest that we move to the vote?
Can I
just
now
ask
have
a
a
question?
proposal? No, it's gone too far now for questions, but we now have a proposal, so I don't think I can present my vote. But can we have some clarification from Michael, please?
By way of clarity, the ordinary process would usually be, in the absence of members' comments, the chair would move a resolution based on the committee report and discussions at the meeting. At this juncture, Councillor Cummings, I believe, has sought to move a motion to refuse the application on the basis that the proposed development would result in the loss of employment, land and associated provisions within the area and have a harmful impact on the commercial viability of the adjacent area, if I understand correctly, in which case that motion to be valid will require a seconder. So does any member wish to second that motion? Please indicate clearly and I will switch to you and then bring your microphone on. In which case, in the absence of a seconder, that motion...
Sorry,
Anna.
Michael, I wish to second that motion for the same reasons as Councillor Cummings has indicated. I do understand the need for, to protect our environment, and the energy would contribute to cleaner air in our city. But I do have to object to it because of the loss of the employment land. So I'm asking the same. I'm supporting Councillor Cummings for now.
Thank you, Councillor Juarez.
And can I speak before we go to the vote on this, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to bring you in now, if I may.
I would like to urge people to vote against this because we're not losing employment land. We may be losing jobs for people, but we've got to remember also that this market only occurs on 2 days a week. The market could be relocated, and I really do urge that should happen because I don't want to see anybody lose their source of income and employment. But I am against this because it is still a valid industrial use that is being proposed. Not only that, it's environmentally friendly and sustainable, and there is no other site within the city that they can have this battery storage on. That was made clear in the planning notes. So I'm against this amendment, or proposal rather.
Thank you, Chair. I've now applied a mute to all microphones and participants, and at this juncture we will firstly deal with Councillor Cummings' motion, the effect of which will be to recommend refusal and require a further report to a subsequent meeting of committee. All those in favour of the motion to refuse as put forward by Councillor Cummings, I will go by a name firstly to Councillor Cummings and bring you in and ask you to confirm verbally. Please put your mic on. Can you confirm your vote, Councillor Cummings?
Yes, I can confirm my vote.
Thank you. Next, move to Councillor Hanson. If you could confirm your vote, please, and put your microphone on.
Right.
Sorry, could you just confirm that it wasn't clear? Against, thank you, Councillor Hanson. Now moving to Councillor Thompson. Please confirm your vote.
Abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Lavelle. Please unmute your mic and confirm your vote.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
I'm against this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Marat, you are now on screen. Councillor Marat, thank you.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Marat. Councillor Juarez.
For the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Juarez. Councillor Conception, I'm coming to you now. If you could confirm your vote.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Conception. And lastly, that is the chair, please.
Against.
Thank you, Chair. On that basis, the motion falls with the voting being 2 in favour, 6 against and 1 abstention. Chair, would you wish to move an alternative resolution on the matter?
Yeah. Can I move that the recommendation be approved?
Thank you, Chair.
Agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Same process as before. Moving swiftly to Councillor Cummings. Please indicate your vote. Just put your mic on, please. Councillor Cummings.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hanson.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Lavelle.
For.
Thank you. So you can confirm your vote again, please. Now you're on screen.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Lavelle. Councillor Kennedy.
I'm for.
Thank you. Councillor Marat.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Juarez.
Abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Juarez. Councillor Conception.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Conception. And Chair, please.
For.
Thank you, Chair. The voting on this motion by the Chair was 6 in favour, 1 against, 2 abstaining. Therefore, the motion is carried and the application is approved on that basis. Chair, as I indicated earlier, we do have a maximum time duration for dealing with applications virtually, which is 4 hours, of which we now have just under 10 minutes remaining, and obviously a number of outstanding applications.
So can we carry on with Edinburgh Road or not?
I think we have opportunity to deal with the Edinburgh Road item, yes, but all the others only understand that these will be deferred and we will convene at a later date to deal with those, if that's agreeable to members.
Yeah.
Mike, I need to leave the meeting now, please.
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor Conception.
Hello there. Can I just say something a minute, please? You still haven't answered one question. What's very important to a lot of people what have stuff in storage is how long do we have now to relocate I repeat, locate, please.
Just to confirm, Chair, I've just muted all participants and remind members of the public that the opportunity to address the committee on the various applications has been afforded. In terms of matters outside of the control of the planning process, which would include the relocation elements to which you refer, we would advise you discuss that directly with your landlord as appropriate and other operators on the site as present. Chair, if I can return to you, please. If you'd unmute your mic.
Right, so can we go on to 108 Edinburgh Road, please? John Crawley, I assume is present, but I'm not sure whether you want to speak or not.
I'm present, Chair. I'd like to speak, please. My name is Joe Crawley. Just to confirm.
Joe. All right, then. Would you like to go ahead, then?
So I believe you have our slides that I sent in a couple of weeks ago, just with regards to a few objections that we've had. With regards to the HMO detracting from the uniform appearance of the conservation area. Now, we're not looking to amend this building in any way, kind of like a visual impact on the neighbourhood. So, yeah, I mean, a HMO in a conservation area, people may think, you know, HMOs attract a certain kind of tenants that may not fit in with the, you know, the surrounding areas. But we are a professional company. We've got many HMOs throughout the cities, and yeah, our rents do reflect the kind of area in consideration, really. So, you know, we're looking to, you know, make a HMO here, but the rent will reflect the kind of tenant that we're looking to bring into that area. So we're looking more for professional tenants. It won't be marketed to, you know, the student population. So there won't be any late night parties there. It'll purely be professionals that we're looking to bring into this area. So, yeah, it's just with regards to the HMO. Yes, we do have HMOs in certain areas that do attract certain kind of genres of tenants, but we're not really looking to kind of market this to, you know, students or the like. It purely be for the professional market. So, yeah, I do believe there's been objections to the skylights we're looking to put into the roof of the attic conversion we're looking to add to Edinburgh Road there. Now, I have looked on Google Earth and there are many properties in the vicinity with skylights in there. So I don't feel like our application, you know, would impact on the area, like a visual impact with the skylights. I mean, I do believe there's many properties throughout that region and along Edinburgh Road and Empress Road that do have skylights in the front and gable and rear elevations of the properties. So, yeah, like I say, we're a professional company. We've done many HMOs. We're up to about 200 properties now throughout the city, and we've never really had a problem before. And I'm just hoping if maybe you could see fit to pass our application on this development we're looking to do.
Thank you. So are there any questions from members of the planning committee to Joe Crawley, please? No. So in that case, can I have, we've got two objectors here. Can I have Councillor Nick Small first, please?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I
hear
can.
you. Okay. Well, thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak on this. I'm speaking on behalf of my constituents. Kensington Fields is an area with around 1,500 Victorian properties and terraced houses. It's the largest extant Victorian residential estate, we think, anywhere in the country, certainly outside of London. It's a conservation area, and it's been recognised as a conservation area for around 12 years by Liverpool City Council. The essential problem here is you've got 3-bedroomed terraced housing, family houses, houses that were built for families, houses that throughout that sort of last 100 years or so have predominantly been family houses. What we're seeing is a lot of these houses being converted into HMOs, either small HMOs or larger HMOs. Typically what's happening, they are 2-storey terraced houses with 3 bedrooms. They're converting the living room into a bedroom and putting another 2 bedrooms into the attic. That's causing lots and lots of problems. It's impacting significantly on the housing market in Kensington Fields. We've now got, we think, around a quarter to a third of all of the housing stock not being houses for families to buy or rent, but HMOs largely for students. And you know, I do think that.
Apologies, Councillor Small, I'm having to stop you speaking at this juncture because the software we use for purpose of virtual meetings will conclude the meeting in less than a minute. Therefore, in accordance with the procedural rules which now apply as Committee Secretary, I would ask that members note that the remaining items of business included today will be deferred and determined at a later date. Certainly our apologies, but we are limited by the technology, and that applies for all the various platforms used for this purpose. We will seek to reconvene within the next week for the remaining outstanding items of business, and that will be communicated to all speakers. But thank you certainly for your participation. Over to the Chair, please, if I may. Chair, you can unmute your microphone if you wish.
Realise I got muted. I wasn't muted before. So I've only really got time to say to you, I think, thank you very much for attending. I'm very sorry that we weren't able to conclude all our business today, but there have been problems with technology because there are such a large amount of people that have to be accommodated in this meeting, and it's also been live streamed. So maybe the technology will improve if these kinds of meetings continue for some considerable time. But in the meantime, we hope to see you at the conclusion of the meeting, which, as Michael said, we hope will be within the week. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you everyone for your participation. And for those applications outstanding, those will be reissued with an invitation to rejoin. I'll do that at the earliest opportunity. And again, thank you for your time. It is very much appreciated by all concerned. Thank you, everyone.